Hit on the Boat Bound Show.
Fueled by Fleetway Market.
Fuel up your car and cooler at Fleetway this football season.
Let's go.
Good morning. Welcome in. The Out of Bounds Show is brought to you by Corner Market. Over 20 grocery stores in the state of Mississippi. Corner Market is the official grocery store of the Out of Bounds Show. Premium meat, fresh produce, and a great selection of craft beer, all powered by Corner Market. Out of Hattiesburg, but over 20 locations in the state of Mississippi. Good morning. Welcome in. We've got Tom Luginbill, National College Football Analyst, also runs recruiting for ESPN. Lugs joins us on the Bell's Two-Hearted Ale guest line. What does your week look like this week with signing day on Wednesday, my man?
Really just kind of getting everything in order. To be honest with you, once we went to 2 signing periods 5 years ago, it's actually lightened the load. We went from doing a 12-hour-long show that was live for 12 straight hours with a lot of lead up going into the show and then some stuff on the back end to wrap everything up. And now, it's something where, we're working through the classes and the class ranks right now, filling up some other classes, maybe some lower tier Power 5 schools where maybe we had a guy or two in the class that we hadn't evaluated. We're getting caught up on those guys. And then we'll do some Sports Center hits, do some TV live on Wednesday. We've got a 2-hour show on ESPN from 3 to 5 Eastern time. And then we'll wrap up with our Recruiting Nation radio show on Sirius XM 84 on Wednesday night from 7 to 9. And then after that is we'll wrap up stuff on Thursday. And then I turn my attention to our bowl slate because I've got actually this week, Bo, is nothing compared to my bowl week. I happen to have my entire week is all spent in Orlando. So I've got the Cheez-It Bowl, all right, with Clemson and Iowa State. Then I've got to do the 2 Under Armour practices, the 3-hour live practices that we air on ESPNU consecutively after that. Then the Citrus Bowl in Orlando between Iowa and Kentucky. And then the day after that, we'll wrap it up with the Under Armour All-America game. So
That's
I've got
awesome.
5 days and 5 events in that week. So it'll be a lot of fun.
That's cool. Is your family going to be able to go down?
No, they're not, and that's fine, to be honest with you, because it's just I'm so swamped during that thing.
That makes sense.
I rarely get. I don't get to have much social time when it comes down to it. So it's actually sometimes it's just best. And when you're going down to Orlando, and obviously you work for ESPN, we work for Disney, we got some cool perks. You don't want to go anywhere near those theme parks between Christmas and New Year's. I can tell you that. That is not the time to go to Disney.
That's for sure. Tom Luginbill on the Out of Bounds Show. All right. Mike Elko is leaving Texas A&M. He's going to Duke. And Jimbo's the defense has driven this thing, I think, the last few years. And he is considered an outstanding defensive coordinator. State and Ole Miss play this team every year. They went 2-0 against them this year. Look, he did it before. He grabbed him from Notre Dame. It was a super hire, but this is a monster hire for Jimbo in the offseason. You agree?
Yeah, I think it is. Now, whoever the hire ends up being is going to inherit some really, really good players. That's the one thing that's going to be really, really attractive about the job. Not only that it's Texas A&M and you've got great resources and everything, but whoever's going to be that guy is going to have some good personnel to work with. So that's got to be exciting. The thing that's kind of interesting about it is, we always hear about the hot up and coming, young offensive hotshots, right? That everybody wants to hire, the 33-year-old offensive coordinator, the guys that were the Mike Norvells, the Lincoln Rileys, the Rhett Lashleys, all of these guys. But we don't hear all that much about that type of player on the defensive side of the ball as an assistant, right? Well, Dan Lanning's 35, just took the Oregon job. That name maybe prior to Dan Lanning was Marcus Freeman. He's now off the market. He's the head coach now at Notre Dame. So, who do you go target? If you're A&M and you say, I wonder if Jimbo feels like this has to be a splash hire, because I think it's got to be more of a fit-based hire where, all right, maybe excuse me, you hire a guy that's not at a high profile program right now, something to that degree. Who knows? But I'll say this, and I'm not saying he'd be willing to do it, but a guy you got to at least call is Gary Patterson.
Interesting. Yeah.
The guy's too good of a football coach.
He is.
Too much experience. But yeah, you just try to think of, Alex Grinch went to SC now. He's kind of been a hot name a little bit. And I don't know. I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how that thing plays out. And you know what? Maybe he goes the NFL route. You never know.
That's right. Yeah, with the money that everybody's throwing around today in the SEC especially. So here's Tom Luginbill on the Out of Bounds show. Lugs, now everybody's competing. I mean, you got A&M, LSU, Georgia, and Clemson. And some of them need both, okay? But I just want to stay with DC. Like, it's a crowded bar right now. You know what? And these are all top. Well, A&M wants to be, but the other three have proven that they can either play for it or win it. But they all have money, so they could be competing for some of the same guys. I mean, those are four big names looking for DCs. Luke?
Oh yeah, big time. I mean, and think about it. The pocketbooks are going to start coming out, and we've already seen all this money being thrown around with the high school, with the head coaches that have made moves and guys getting their salaries doubled and things of that nature. So. Yeah, there's going to be probably a pretty short list and probably some pretty fierce competition on the trail. Some guys get locked onto the same guy, and now all of a sudden, I'm not saying it becomes a bidding war, but to your point, all of those programs are capable of not only getting in one, but winning one.
Mm-hmm. Dan Lanning and Marcus Freeman, both 35 years old, haven't run anything, and they land the Notre Dame and Oregon job. You were kind of hitting on something. We went through this big run of offensive coaches being hired, and it's almost like Dave Aranda had success, and a lot of the AD said, oh, I can hire a defensive coordinator. Is that what you see? What kind of has happened the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I really do. I think that we go down this path of thinking that because offensive football has changed so much and put so much pressure on defenses that you can't be successful unless your leadership has an offensive background. And then I go and I look at Nick Saban, defensive guy. I look at Kirby Smart. I look at Luke Fickell, defensive guy. I look at Mel Tucker, defensive guy. I mean, you can name a lot of dudes out there. Bronco Mendenhall is a defensive guy. Just because you're a defensive guy doesn't mean you don't know how to hire the right people or know exactly what you want to be from an identity perspective and how you want to run an offensive football team. I mean, you look at Brett Venables just went out and hired Jeff Levy. Very clear on what he wants to be and what they are going to be. So I think sometimes, unfortunately, you do have some defensive guys that can tend to get overlooked because we're just in this era of the spread offense and the zone read and, the RPOs and all of this sorts of thing. And listen, we can say all we want about how, you don't have to be great on defense anymore and blah, 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 blah. Well, look at the teams that are in the college football playoff. They're pretty damn good on defense.
Right.
There's a reason why they are there. And there's a reason why they are in contention every year. We can talk all we want about offensive football, but generally what you will find is that if you're a really good offensive football team, you are going to have a more difficult time against teams that have personnel on defense, particularly in the trenches. And those teams will generally outlast everybody else if they have talent and depth. And so the common denominator, while the narrative seems to have changed, the common denominator remains the same as it relates to the college football playoff. Look at the defensive personnel of those four teams. Look at it last year. Look at it the year before, and the year before that, and the year before that. That part hasn't changed. So I still think there's got to be a defensive-minded persona involved in all of this, and those guys should have opportunities to become head coaches.
Tom Luginbill, National College Football Analyst with ESPN on the Out of Bounds show. Let's go with Dabo. So it's been a long time. It's been about 10 years since he had to do this, which is an eternity in college football. Now, he nailed it with the Brent Venables and the combo of Jeff Scott and Tony Elliott. Now everybody's gone.
Why had Chad Morris before that? If you got to give credit for that one too.
Yeah. Now, some people in the Clemson family will argue that he wasn't that good, but I don't know. You've been close to that,
Well, I know the offense turned around quickly because remember, you know who he fired to hire him?
Billy Napier. Right?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly what it was. Yeah. So something wasn't going the way they wanted to go there, and then he goes out and gets, Chad Morris, who was a hot name at that time, doing a lot of exciting things on offense, and it panned out. So, yeah, you're right. He hasn't had to do this in quite some time.
They've already won it. They played for 4, 1, 2. This thing is a machine. I think a couple of things, Tom. Obviously, he has to nail both hires because he's probably not going to recruit like Bama and Georgia, although they've gotten better. And then 2, I think Dabo's going to have to do what Mike Krzyzewski did 20 years ago. Mike Krzyzewski kind of got on his high horse and said, I'm not going to sign one-and-doners. And somebody sat him down and said, Coach, do you want to win national championships? He went, yeah. And they said, well, we're going to have to sign one and done. Dabo's high horse on the transfer portal, I think that's got to come to an end and soon. Your thoughts, Tom?
I think for the majority of programs that are not considered elite, yes, you have to cast your line into the transfer portal. The question you have to ask yourself, though, is when you are an Alabama, a Georgia, an Ohio State, a Clemson, what is the transfer portal out there to do? It's to make your roster better, to upgrade your roster, to improve your roster. Well, are you going to go the transfer portal route when you already have all the best players? Like in my opinion, I'm going to use Alabama for example. Alabama essentially went into the transfer portal for a need position with one guy that they had recruited heavily. He became a finalist for him when he decided to choose another school. And that player, Henry To'o, had 148 tackles in 2 seasons at Tennessee, right? So Alabama looks at him and says, okay, he's an upgrade right now. He can help us. We know the kid inside and out. We know he's not going to be a locker room killer. That helps us. That's one guy, though. Because if you're Nick Saban, if you're Dabo Swinney, if you're Ryan Day, if you're Kirby Smart, you're looking in the transfer portal, how many of the guys that are in there are better than who you're playing with? So where does your investment need to go long term? Because listen, I got to be honest with you. I think that the transfer portal thing it can work, all right, but it can also destroy you. If you're not building long-term depth, if you're going into the transfer portal and you're taking 1-year guys, even 2-year guys, I think if you're going to go into the transfer portal and you're going to improve your roster, you need guys with 3 years of eligibility, minimum. Because if you don't do that, you're essentially just building a roster of junior college players. And that doesn't establish any long-term depth. So I don't think he necessarily has to get off of his soapbox on that thing. I just think that they look at it very, very carefully because there's a handful of programs that are different than everybody else. And they look into the transfer portal and they're looking at their own roster and they're saying, that guy's not better than what we have. We need to just go recruit the 3, 4, 5-year guy at the high school level. Now, that's not going to be the same for everybody, but I do think it is for a select group of teams.
All right. So Clemson, Georgia, LSU, and A&M all looking for defensive coordinators. Clemson and LSU looking for both. I know these guys have to recruit once they're hired, Tom, because of the early signing period. So I don't think there's necessarily panic, but ideally you would already have guys named, but you only have so many hours in the day. How do you think that's impact? I mean, LSU, if you go by, their average star rating, it's off the charts, but they only have 11 dudes.
Sure.
He hired Frank Wilson. He's probably got some other dudes that are running around. But LSU, how do you think that's impacting their recruiting, not having an OCDC right now?
Well, I mean, I think as long as the head coach is your singular voice at a place like that and the guy with the clout of a Brian Kelly, I think it's sustainable. I think you can overcome it in the short term. And you can speak from an offensive perspective because, it wasn't that long ago that Brian Kelly was actually calling the offense, before he turned over the reins several years ago. And so I think you can recruit to that through your own approach and blueprint to offensive football as the head coach. So that's going to be a big voice in the living room. Defensively, listen, it just puts them into a challenge like it does for anybody else. But I think when you're LSU and kids that are getting recruited by LSU, they know that great players have been spit out of LSU year in and year out that have gone on to the NFL on the defensive side of the football. I think LSU kind of sells itself on that side of the ball. And you just got to listen, you don't have any definitive answers for the kids right now. You got to create the vision, paint the picture, show them what you want to be, what you're trying to be. And the fact that you don't have a guy yet just means you're trying to do the most diligent work that you can to make sure it's the right guy. And kids will understand that. To be honest with you, you're asking the question about, these coaches not, having maybe all of their staff set and this and that. And, there's been a lot of discussion about the early signing period and should we go back to one or should we back it up? And, I don't think that has as much to do with coaching changes as it has to do with the fact that these coaches are in an impossible situation because they essentially have a roster of 85 free agents. So whether you're a sitting coach or a new coach, not only are you scrambling and recruiting, you're scrambling to figure out who's coming and who's going. Who's actually going to still be on this roster? Do I need to replace this guy or that guy? How do we get around that? And to be honest with you, this is what I would propose because I think it would help the players and the coaches alike. And I know this conversation started with those sitting opening spots at some premier programs, but it's bigger than that because I think we either need to go back to the one signing period in February, or we back up the first signing period into the third week of January and then back up the second one into maybe the latter part of February and make the entire month of December a dead period. So you tell the coaches, all right, and the players, here's a window for the transfer portal. You got the entire month. If you want to leave, right, you can leave. All right. We're not going to have any signings. We're not going to, you can recruit the way you would recruit during a dead period, but give these sitting coaches and their staffs and these rosters and these new coaches and the staff they're putting together and the rosters they're trying to evaluate and manage, give them that month so that they have a better solid foundation of knowing what their exact number is. Right now, they don't know what their numbers are and they're all scrambling. So we've got to come up with a way of correcting this to alleviate some of these issues that lead into next Wednesday.
All right, let's switch gears. When you look at this 2022 class, Tom Luginbill with ESPN on the Out of Bounds show, where's the depth? At what position or positions is this class that our coaches are about to sign on Wednesday? What are the deep positions in this class, Tom?
Defensive line, corner, and wide receivers. So whether it's a Travis Hunter at corner, a Walter Nolan at defensive line, a Travis Shaw at defensive line, a Luther Burden and an Evan Stewart and a number of wideouts. Those guys are potentially difference makers. I mentioned the corners, Damani Jackson choosing between what's likely going to be USC and Alabama. A guy like Jeremiah Alexander, who's an edge pass rusher along the defensive front, Shamar Stewart, again, a guy that's a defensive end. All of those guys are composite top 10 overall players for just about everybody. And so I think the top-level depth begins with those three positions. And then I do think it's a strong linebacker class. It's linebacker and probably to some degree offensive tackle. But when you got people like Harold Perkins, let's see, Devon Campbell, C.J. Hicks. These guys are all outside linebacker types that are all going to be top 20, top 25 players, regardless of what outlet you're viewing. So it's those are the kind of the usual suspects. And if you followed our rankings and the way we really approach it is we place value on the hardest positions to find and the positions that lend to championship level football. So you're going to start yourself from the inside and you're going to work yourself out. So your offensive line, your defensive line at quarterback starts right there. And then you're going to go very, very far out, and now you're going to end up at the perimeter spots at corner. And again, we talk about it all the time. You know, the 6 foot and taller corner, all right, that checks boxes is going to be recruited by everybody. The 5'10" corner better be so superior talent-wise to somebody that's taller than him, or he's not going to have as many options. That's just how the game's evolved, and that's what it's turned into. And so, but that's really how the class is shaping up, what it's made up. And what's interesting too, Bo, is the classes that right now are kind of shaping up. I think it's a 3-horse race for the number 1 class. Alabama, Texas A&M, and Georgia. In some order of those 3, going to be 1, 2, or 3, with A&M having the most to gain in terms of the most open spots available, where some of the top-level prospects, like a Harold Perkins, have the Aggies, you know, maybe as a finalist or in the top 2 or 3. But then you have a Missouri that's likely going to finish in the top 10. All right, you have a North Carolina likely going to finish in the top 10. You have a shocking Stanford class that's on the cusp of the top 10 after a 3-9 season. So there's a lot of teams, to me, with the coaching changes. Oklahoma, all right, Clemson's seen a mad rash of decommitments. They've got a lot of ground to make up in a short period of time. And like you said, they don't have an AD and they don't have 2 coordinators. So a lot of work to be done for Clemson.
All right, we got 1 minute, or maybe a minute and change. Tell me the difference between, I know they're in different classes, but quarterback, what is the difference between Walker Howard, who's big time committed to LSU, and Arch Manning, who is not in this class but the next class, but 2 Louisiana guys? Luke's.
Oh, that's a good one. I'd probably say that Walker's a little bit more of a dual threat, even though Arch is the best athlete of the Mannings and is a deceptively good athlete. I think Walker's a little bit more of your natural instinctive runner when those opportunities kind of present themselves, maybe in the manner of a Desmond Ritter type guy at Cincinnati. Both really, really good players. In fact, I'm frustrated. I feel bad for Walker. We have him in the Under Armour game, and he suffered a season-ending injury, won't be able to play with us. I was really looking forward to seeing him after seeing him this summer and seeing how he's grown. But the reason why people are so on Arch Manning is because he's really, really talented, but athletically he's so different than his uncle.
Okay. But you're high on Walker Howard, for sure.
Oh, yeah, I think he's got a chance to be really, really good. And by the way, the one guy we didn't talk about, though, as far as an offensive assistant that's out there, what's Joe Brady going to do?
Yes.
What's the interest level in Joe Brady? That's going to be interesting, whether you're Miami, whether you're Clemson, whoever it may be. That's a big one.
You're right. I can't wait to see if he stays in the NFL or comes back to college. Thanks, buddy. We'll talk soon.
All right, bud. Stick.
Tom Luginbill, national college football analyst with ESPN. He joined us on the Bell's Two-Hearted Ale guest line. Recruiting, transfer portal, NFL, and we still have openings, including the offensive coordinator position at Ole Miss. We're live in the Bank Plus studio. Hour number 3 coming up.